If everything you were ever told about grief, that it's something to heal, something to move through, or something to leave behind, was actually wrong, or even backwards, what if grief isn't the wound? What if it's the doorway? Today on the Expansion Room, I am sitting with Angela Clement, a certified grief coach, speaker, healer, and author who turned the most devastating loss of her life into a blueprint for awakening. If you have ever lost someone or something important to you that cracked your whole world open, then this conversation is going to meet you right where you are. If we are talking about grief, know that it is not the ending, but it is one of the most powerful invitations your soul will ever receive. So let's begin. Angela, welcome. Welcome to the Expansion Room. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you so much.
Let's see. Let's start with you sharing a little bit about yourself and what brought you to the work that you do now.
Sure. I was a school principal. I was in education for over 30 years, and I ended up a principal of a very small school, K to 12 school in Val Marie. And that's a very small town in southern Saskatchewan, Canada. And here we raised two kids, my husband and I. He was a rancher, cattle rancher. And so we had cow-calf pairs, and it was an amazing life. It was an amazing place to bring up our children, and the place that I still call home. And yet, in 2021, just as he had sold the ranch and decided to retire, and I was poised to retire as well, he was diagnosed with colon cancer. It was stage 4, and he was diagnosed in January, and he passed away at the end of October of that year. So my whole world was completely turned upside down. In that time, I retired from my position to help look after him. And we moved to another town called Maple Creek to be close to my son and to be closer to a hospital. And so when the dust all settled and he had passed, I found myself retired. I found myself in a new community, not knowing many people, and also completely what I felt like was alone. And I was so grateful that we moved and that I was close to my son and I got that clean start. But still, it was a tough it was almost like, everything had changed. And so I had no choice but to start to figure out how I could rebuild my life again.
Absolutely. What a big shift that is for you.
Yeah, it was huge.
Absolutely. And there are so many faces to grief, right? And so death is one of the ones that we think of the most when we hear the word grief. And that's usually the one that largely affects us the most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't realize it then, that I was grieving even before I lost my husband, because just grieving the fact that he was sick, and I was grieving the life that we had, and the unknown, there was so many unknowns.
Yeah. Absolutely. That you had to navigate through and still even after navigate through.
Yeah.
And so grief and bereavement go hand in hand, and oftentimes people have to navigate their work life in order to also manage the grief or bereavement. But you didn't even have work to distract you
No.
in that time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a blessing in some ways
Hmm.
and really hard in others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How was it hard?
Um, just that, I didn't know how to sometimes keep myself busy, right?
Mm.
There was so much to do when he first passed away. Of course, there's all of those things that you got to take care of with the memorial service and all
Hmm.
of the paperwork and things that have to take place. And
Hmm.
then as things slowed down, I found myself in a place where I was really uncomfortable.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did that uncomfortability have to say to you?
Yeah, it felt like I was searching for someone or some resource that would tell me that I would be okay. Because in
Mm.
that quiet silence, when all the emotions started to come up, it felt like they might kill me.
Yeah.
They were so intense and so dark in the beginning. And I didn't know what to do with that.
Hmm.
And I really didn't know where to reach out. And I remember thinking, well, I could go to a counselor or a therapist, but I kept thinking to myself, what would they say to me that would
Hmm.
make me feel better because he's still gone?
Right.
Yeah. I
Right.
remember thinking that a lot. And so I didn't reach out to a counselor at first because I felt like, maybe there was something else out there that would
Mm.
help him. Or maybe if I just waited long enough, because they say time heals all wounds. If I just
Right.
wait long enough,
Right.
things will get better. But it only took about, a couple of months to realize that things weren't getting better. They were
Okay.
actually getting worse. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when someone is grieving the loss of a loved one, grieving a divorce, career, maybe they lost their job, a big identity shift, or even their health, so much can be going on in their minds,
Mhm.
right? Most people immediately want to figure out how they could change it, right? Immediately, we want out of that feeling, that experience, that grief. And as you mentioned, sometimes it feels like grief can overwhelm you or overtake you or kill you. And since there are all kinds of grief that people are navigating, even in my audience, can you help us understand what grief really is at its core?
Yeah, it's taken me a while to develop my own definition, so to speak,
Hmm.
of grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've interviewed over 200 people now and talked to them about grief and asked them what they thought of grief. And everybody has a little bit different take on it,
Yeah.
but for me, I feel like that it's a God-given process. And
Mm.
we need it because life is always changing. Nothing ever stays the same. And every time life changes, there's something that we have to let go of from the past. It's something that it is just part of this life.
Mm.
And so I realized through this that this process was given to us to help us move through those changes and to help us let go of what we need to let go of and to start to look forward again to the future.
Mm.
And, when you think about it, uh, you know, there's day and there's night.
Hmm.
And the new day starts or the new month or the new year, and we have to let go of the previous, right?
Right.
It's just a lot harder when it's that special person that you've spent every day with.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I figured out that grief is not only, a psychological thing, it
Hmm.
is also very much an emotional thing, it's an energetic thing, it's all encompassing.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about grief, I talk about, the emotions that come up, but I also talk about what's going on in the mind and the pathways that we've built over the years. I think that's why I found it so hard. I was with my husband for 35 years. So, of course, there were routines that happened every day for 35 years. And it's really hard for the mind to get around the fact that that's not like that anymore.
Right.
It's like you have to relearn
You
all of
basically
those
do.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard. If you think back to when you learned your timetables, you don't learn that overnight. It takes time.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with this. It's a relearning process. And it's all encompassing. Yeah.
Yeah, that all encompassing, we're just, it's a spiritual experience. It takes
Hmm.
all of you to move through, all the
Yes.
parts of you to move through.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes sense. And how would you say unprocessed grief shows up in the body? And even in our lives as a whole, in our businesses, our relationships, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, certainly I understand that we store our emotions in our organs. If we don't want to express them in some way because they're too painful or we don't make time to do that, then they build.
Yeah.
And I know for a fact for myself, there were a couple of things. One was the digestive issues.
Mm-hmm.
I really stored a lot
Ah,
there, and the gallbladder, which gallbladder and liver are really associated with anger, and also in my lungs because grief really sits in the lungs. If you talk about Chinese medicine, they'll talk about where that emotion sits, and
exactly.
so I found myself lots of times, and I know a lot of widows who talk about just not being able to breathe. You
Yeah,
know,
I've heard that before. Yeah. It's
yeah,
like hard to take a full breath.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, because it stores in there. And if we can't find a way to express it, it will build and build and build. And it does affect us physically
Mm-hmm.
and emotionally. And when we are in that state, then yes, it's going to affect our relationships. We're going to snap a little quicker. We're not going to
Mm-hmm.
be able to be that compassionate person for someone else because we don't have the capacity to do that when we're full of our own heaviness and emotion.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Oh, what would you say is the most common thing that people get wrong about grief then?
Well, for me, it was I thought if I just went in my room and cried,
Mm-hmm.
eventually it would just get better. I would figure it out.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was really quick finding out that that wasn't how it was going to work, that I was going to need to have some support and that I couldn't always be alone, that sometimes I would need to step out
Mm-hmm.
and that would be difficult. And yet, just like learning your times tables, in order to relearn how to live without your loved one, you have to practice. You have to get out there. And it feels awful the first time you do it.
Yeah.
I remember my friend, she talked about, going to the theater. She went to the theater with her husband all the time. And then when he passed, she had to kind of scaffold herself back in there. So she would go to the theater when there was no play, and she'd just sit there and absorb that. And then she'd go back when they were practicing, and she'd sit there and absorb that. And she'd take it in small steps. Now she can go and enjoy the theater without her husband, and
Mm-hmm.
it's okay. But it's partly because the mind needs that time.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to process the emotion as well.
Yes, indeed.
So there's, there's that thinking if you get busy, and or you just watch TV, it'll go away. You can numb yourself in a lot of ways. You can drink, you can gamble, you can shop, you can do all these things, but in the
Mhm.
end, if you don't actually allow that expression of grief, it does catch up to you.
Indeed, it does.
Yeah.
Indeed, it does. I think that you're right. You pointed out earlier that we think of grief as this thing you process mentally or emotionally, but it also, like we talk about on this show often, is that everything affects the body eventually,
Yeah.
right? Whatever
Mhm.
the thoughts and emotions that we hold that we don't let move through us
Yeah.
will affect us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You had said that grief is perfectly designed to awaken us to who we truly are. Can you say some more about that?
Yeah, it really forces you to ask some really big questions,
Yeah.
like, why am I here? And where did my loved one go? And what's the point? Because you get to that place where you just don't even really want to exist because it's too hard.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all gone to that place.
Yeah.
And when you go there, it really forces you to think about your belief system,
Mm-hmm.
what you truly believe in. I remember thinking, I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know if what I've been told is true. From my religious background, I was questioning all of that, trying to figure out what's true for me. What do
Mm-hmm.
I really believe? And I think that's the most important thing. It's not what others believe or what others tell you is true, it's what you know is true inside of you. And I think this is what it forces you to do. And it forces you to figure out who you are and what you stand for and what your values are and what you want to live for now. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really gut-wrenching, and at the same time it it awakens you in a way that I know somebody explained it as the world gets colorful again.
Ah.
And I thought, wow, that's a really neat way to explain it, because you do kind of walk around in that haze and everything's just a little bit dampened because every time you do something fun or what should be fun, you think about your loved one not being there. And it casts this shadow over top of everything that you do. But when you awaken and realize who you are, and
Mm-hmm.
you understand that we are just human bodies, there's this soul that goes on. When you start to embrace that, then the world starts to look more colorful again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Beautifully said. And in that awareness, I would imagine connecting to other human beings because grief is so hard to move through in isolation.
Yeah.
And so I imagine in connecting with other people that the shift happens a little sooner. So how does community change the expression of grief or the experience of grief?
Well, I think that probably one of the most important things is that you find people that can acknowledge your pain.
Yeah.
That's kind of the first piece, is that somebody recognizes at least partly what you're going through. They're never going to fully understand because our relationships are all different. So you can
Mm-hmm.
never truly understand what somebody else is going through. But talking to another widow will have lots of similarities in the things that we're going through and the things that are painful. And not that we want to dwell in that, but it's really important to acknowledge it, at least at first, and to
Absolutely.
let yourself, feel like you're normal, that this is not, something that's going to break you, that other people can and have moved through grief and are able to live a joyful and fulfilling life again. I mean, just the fact that you can get hope is
Mm-hmm.
important. you know? And so I tell people, you want to find others that have gone through the process and are on the other side and have actually transformed their lives through that.
Yeah.
And that will give you the inspiration and the hope. Some people get stuck, and that's okay. But when we ruminate over it over and over and we cycle those emotions, we can stay in that for a long time. Yeah.
Yes. Some people that I've met over my lifetime have never fully gotten to the other side of it.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Your community that you started, Awaken Your Soul's Journey, is where people can do that. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't know where to turn. And after I took my grief certification, I felt like I could help other people. And it felt good to do that. And so in the fall, I decided I'll start my own group and we'll see who shows up, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I have my own support group, and it's more of we talk a lot about the spiritual aspect of grief and how, we talk about near death experiences, we talk about connections with the other side, we talk about the ways that we can connect with our loved ones, and we bring a lot of resources, not, it's just our lived experience, really. And any books that we've read, YouTube videos that we've watched that have been helpful. And somehow, over time, the last 4 or 5 years, I guess it's almost 5 years now, I have found a community, and we still meet. And a lot of us are not meeting because, we feel like we need that grief support.
Right.
We're meeting now because we're like a family.
Right. Exactly. You've
Yeah.
created a community. Yeah.
Yes. And so when someone new comes in,
Mhm.
there's so much support there because there's a lot of people who have gone through this process and have a lot of wisdom in within them that they can share. And I think, it's a great place to get acknowledged in your grief and a great place to ask questions.
Beautiful. So you're talking about not surviving grief,
Hmm.
but allowing yourself to be transformed by it.
Yeah.
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 There we go. I love that. That definitely brings people hope.
Hmm.
There are in your book, you blend some personal stories and practical exercises. What is one practical exercise that you guide people through in the early stages of their grieving process that maybe helps them to shift something?
I always recommend Donna Eden's daily energy routine.
Hmm.
That is what got me through the 10 months of Blaine being sick and the emotional roller coaster that I went through after he passed. And there is a practicality in the way that she presents energy healing. Sometimes it can feel really complex. This is not. This is a very simple exercise that you can do yourself. Takes about 5 minutes. It's a series of exercises.
Okay.
And if you go to YouTube and you plug in Donna Eden daily energy routine, it's going to come up. And
Okay.
maybe even in several different places with different people presenting it in different ways.
Yeah.
But I found that so helpful just to do that in the morning and before I went to bed, or anytime I was just feeling like things were out of control.
Okay.
Hmm.
What are some of the facets of this practice for people to giving them a little bit of context?
Well, so I can show you a couple of the things that she teaches.
Okay.
One is called the triple warmer smoothie. It is like my favorite.
Okay. I like the name.
So basically, you rub your hands together,
Mm-hmm.
shake them off, and then you put them over top your eyes like this, and you
Yes.
pull them across to your temples, and then around your ears, down across that vagus nerve, which is in your neck, behind your shoulders, and you put quite a bit of pressure there, and then pull your hands down to your heart and just put your hands on your heart. Every time I do this, I can feel my energy drop. It's a grounding exercise, and if you breathe as you're doing that, it is the most amazing. Well, the word is triple warmer smoothie. So triple warmer is like your nervous system, right? Smoothing it out, allowing it to calm and relax.
Mm-hmm.
I've found that the most helpful, and I use that. When my husband was sick, I did that with him every day, sometimes multiple times a day. I would do that routine with him, and I used it when he passed away to help him. Yeah. So it's a big part of the daily routine that I incorporate.
Wonderful. That sounds beautiful and very grounding for sure.
Yeah.
For people who, when they're grieving a loss such as this, decide, because since you were retired, you didn't have this mindset, but for some people, they get back to work quickly.
Yeah.
They get back to producing and moving through tasks at work so that, of course, to stay busy, right? What would you say to them, to people who use work as a way, or if they're business owners, their business as a way to avoid what's coming up for them?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes we have to work. Like, I think we don't have any choice, right? Like,
True.
I was retired, but
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing. If you keep those emotions pushed down, and my coach used to equate it to like holding a beach ball underwater,
Yeah.
eventually that's going to fly up in your face. So,
Mm-hmm.
what I recommend is that you put aside some time at night before you go to bed,
Mm-hmm.
or in the morning is fine, but allow some time during the day just for you to process some of those emotions in whatever way you want. So that could be a walk in nature. It could be some meditation time. It could be some journaling. It could be some painting, drawing, listening to music, anything that's quiet and allows your mind to like set into that emotion, because we have to allow that to come up. And I noticed, people talk about grief bursts, right? All of a sudden they see something or they smell something and it brings back that memory. And then instantly that emotion is coming to the surface. And sometimes you're in a situation like at work where that's not the time. You don't have
Right.
time to process that. And I remember my grief coach telling me to put those in a waiting room.
Hmm.
In my mind, I would, create this waiting room, and I would just basically tell those emotions, I'm going to come back to you, but I
Yeah.
can't do this right now.
Right.
But you have to go back.
Right.
It's the thing, right? You can't leave them in the waiting room forever.
No, no, because
Yeah.
there's one thing about emotions that I know. If we're trying to tamp them down, they will pop back up like that
Yes.
beach ball underwater and at the most inappropriate times.
Absolutely. And be a little uncontrollable. I remember, because I had held mine in for so long, when I did finally let the floodgates go, it was so overwhelming
Yeah.
and scary. And then I realized, it doesn't always have to be that way. Like if you allow the emotion to come when it comes and you allow time for that to happen, you don't have to have a volcano erupting.
Yes.
You can have those moments of a few tears and not, something so overwhelming.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. So true. Can you tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote?
Yeah. So the book actually came out of my journaling. I use journaling as a practice. A lot of writing gratitude every night for things, and I went back in those journals and I retraced my steps and told my story. And because I'm an educator, I felt compelled to put in all the resources that I used and the exercises that I employed, because I know everybody's different. And what
Mm-hmm.
worked for me might not work for someone else. But if I put everything in there,
Yep.
surely something will resonate with somebody. So that's what I
Absolutely. I
did.
hear that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. I love that because everybody needs tools,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
And I tell my clients this often. I say, you got to build up your toolbox for whatever
Mhm.
the situation is that they're in life. Build up your toolbox because what works for you today may not work for you tomorrow. Right?
Yes.
And so you need multiple things in your toolbox at the ready so that when something does come up for you, you have multiple things to choose from.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's great advice.
I love that
Mhm.
you have that in your book. Perfect. And so your community, your support group, and this book offers people something akin to hope, right? It helps them to see that, okay, even though I may be in this space right now, there is the other side. And
Mhm.
so, what does joy after grief actually look like for people? And how does that joy differ from the kind of joy you may have experienced before this grief?
Yeah, well, I always tell the story about how I naturally am very much an introvert.
Okay.
My husband, Blaine, was an extrovert. He loved meeting people, visiting with people, hearing their stories. And I never really understood it.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know why you would strike up a conversation with someone in a restaurant that you don't even know and
And you'll
ask them where
probably never see again.
yeah. And he would do that. And
Yeah.
so now I find myself doing this podcast.
Hmm.
Have a podcast. I speak to a lot of people,
Yeah.
um, and I learn their stories. And it is so meaningful for me now. And I see what joy he got out of that. And I can see now why he did that.
Hmm.
And so I feel like I'm a little bit living through him, or living for him, maybe. I don't know what the wording is, but it's like I'm I'm sure that he's there with me. I
Hmm.
know he is there with me and guiding me and helping me find these cool people to get their stories and to get their inspiration and their hope and to share it with others so that what happened with me, that feeling of discouragement, maybe they will find the hope first and
Mm.
not be discouraged. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. Is there such thing as completion with grief?
Well, I mean, the grieving process, I think, goes on because nothing ever stays the same in life. We're always changing. It's a new day. It's 1 minute from now, we've let go of the beginning of this interview is over. Now it's like it's always changing. And yes, on some degree, we're very willing to let go of the past. And in some degrees, we're not. And it's that resistance that causes the pain. And so
Yeah.
when you see how grief works and you understand it a little bit better, you can embrace it as an opportunity. You can embrace the emotions that come with it as messages, insights. It just changes the whole perspective on the grieving process.
Well said, because the things that come up for us are signaling something,
Yes.
and we usually just call them emotions.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's always an underlying message. I've always found that if you really dig into why you are sad or angry or resentful, there's always something there at the root of that. It might take a while to dig down and find it,
Right.
but just even allowing the emotion without knowing why it's there is going to help you release it. So, either way,
Indeed.
yeah.
Indeed. What has grief made possible for you personally?
I think the world is more colorful. And, I think that I'm able to be more compassionate with people than I ever was before because I've learned what it's like. And I know now, just recently I got news that a cousin of mine was killed in an ATV accident, very sudden. And when I hear that sort of thing, I can feel, everything that I went through and I feel for that person. And yet I know what to do with that. I'm not fearful of it, the emotion that's coming up or the trauma that's being revisited. I'm embracing that in a different way because I know that it helps me heal to do it that way. And it really is a beautiful thing, but I know when you're going through it, it doesn't feel like it. It's hard to take.
Yeah. And so you're living life more colorfully, not in spite of the grief, but maybe because of it.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, because of what I've learned, right? I have a different perspective on life than I used to. Little things don't bother me anymore. They really don't. They
Mm-hmm.
just don't because you figure out what's important, right? And
Right.
so, it doesn't.
You're like, that is small fry stuff over there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So, so true. So, so true. Yeah. What do you think people need to know about grief the most? Like, what's the big aha that we can send them away with in this episode?
I think the biggest thing is don't let anyone tell you, how to grieve,
Mm,
and don't let anyone tell you that you can't move through that and heal. I think that there's so much information out there that's very discouraging about not, grieving forever, carrying it with you, learning how to carry it. Grief changes. Well, grief does change because we're always grieving something different, right? It's
right.
not, and it's not going away, but it's not in the way that we think it is. This sorrow or the emotions that are coming up now are not forever. They don't need to be. There is, you can make a choice. And, if you want to step down that road of healing and you want to transform your life and use the tool of grief to help you with that,
Yeah.
then there's lots of people out there that can show you how to do that. And so can I. Yeah.
Wonderful. Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Angela, this conversation has really been a gift. I think in our society, we don't really talk that much about grief and the process of grief. And in fact, I've heard people say things like, when is this person going to get back to work? Or when are they going to get back to normal?
Yeah.
Almost as if they're like trying to push people along. And I think that's because most of us have a discomfort
Yes.
around death and dying and the grief process. And so when someone else is in it, we're uncomfortable and we want them to get back to normal
That's
so
right.
we don't feel,
That's absolutely true. Yes.
And so this is a valuable conversation and a valuable perspective to just remind people this is completely normal to go through the grieving process. And in fact, it's spiritual. It encompasses all of who we are.
Yes.
Yeah. The way that you hold space for grief and for the people who are in the space of grieving, not as like something to escape or to move through really quickly. I know that this is going to land very deeply for so many people who watch this podcast and who come to work with you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Is your support group local, like in person, or is it virtual? People can join from anywhere.
Yeah, it's Zoom. So
Perfect.
about every 10 days on Zoom. So yes, you can join us anytime. And if you're uncomfortable about sharing, it's okay to just drop in and listen. That's fine. There's no worries with any of that. I don't want to put any more pressure on people because I know how it is when you're in grief. You can just sometimes barely get out of bed in the morning, let alone click and go on a support group. So just know that, this is a space where you can be comfortable and you can come as you are. And there's lots to learn there, lots of wisdom, lots of support, lots of compassion, kindness. Yeah. It's everything I needed when I lost my husband.
Absolutely. And thank you for offering that to others.
Yeah.
Where can listeners find you, connect with you, and get a hand on your book?
Yeah, so everything is on my website, and the website is healingenergy.world. And so the podcast, the book, all my blogs, newspaper articles, you can dive into those. There's some meditations on there. There's the sign up for the support group, and I do sessions with oracle cards, and I do energy healing sessions. And my partner and I actually do a kind of a cool thing called Healing Hearts. He's a medium, and he takes messages from loved ones, and I do the healing and guidance with the oracle cards. So that can be really powerful for people as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm in the state of Maryland, and I know someone else who's a medium, and she does that similar work as well to
Yeah.
connect people back to their loved ones. It's such beautiful work. So thank you
So
for sharing
comforting.
that. I love that.
Mhm.
Beautiful, beautiful. And the name of your book, so that we'll have it at least here. And I'm going to also make sure there's a link in the show notes for it.
Yeah, it's called Awakening Through Grief. And actually, it was just placed as a finalist in the Saskatchewan Book Awards for the best book in
Lovely.
2026. Yeah, best first book. Yeah.
Congratulations.
So
Wonderful.
kind of exciting. But yeah.
Very. Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation and for joining
Thank
me
you.
on the expansion room. And to everyone who is listening for this conversation, if today's conversation stirred something in you, then know that that stirring is information. And so you'll want to take a dive in whichever direction you feel that you need to go. Grief is asking you to pay attention. And you do not have to move through it alone, as we've talked about today. So until next time, keep on doing the inner work, because that is exactly where your impact lives. And I'll see you next time here in the expansion room. Thanks for watching. If you are ready to move beyond survival into greater alignment, greater clarity, and transformation, I'd love to support you. An alignment call is where that journey begins. Take a moment, click the link in the show notes, and schedule your alignment call with me, and let's explore what's possible for you together.